Coming up on Network Africa. The World Health Organization urges Africa not to lose faith in the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine. The UNHCR launches an humanitarian appeal for $1.2 billion to assist South Sudanese refugees. Plus, it says Libya's armed embargo is totally ineffective. Hello and welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Layo Adegoke. African governments are being encouraged not to lose faith in the Oxford-AstraZeneca vaccine, despite its suspension by several European countries. WHO's Chief of Immunization in Africa, Dr. Richard Mihigo, is the one urging governments to not give up hope, saying the product has so far proved to be safe. Earlier, the European Medicine Agency, which is investigating a small number of reports of blood clots following inoculations, reaffirmed its conviction that the benefits of the jab outweigh the risk. African nations are relying on the AstraZeneca jab as it's cheaper and easier to store than other vaccines. Many people have already received doses under the COVAX Global Sharing Initiative. Well, Zimbabwe has received a second batch of the Sinopharm COVID-19 vaccine donated by China, plus additional Sinovac doses commercially procured by the government. A chartered Air Zimbabwe plane landed at Robert Gabriel Mugabe International Airport on Tuesday with the consignment of the vaccines, which was received by Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa, his deputy Constantino Chiwenga, and the Chinese ambassador to Zimbabwe, Guo Xiaochun, and other senior government officials. The same plane also ferried another batch of vaccines for the government of Namibia, where they will be used to kick off the country's vaccination program. Zimbabwe plans to inoculate at least 10 million people to achieve herd immunity.
On behalf of the government and the people of Zimbabwe, and indeed on my own behalf, allow me to yet again express my profound gratitude to His Excellency President Xi Jinping and the fraternal people of China for this generous gesture of support. Their continued assistance and solidarity has indeed lightened our burden. We look forward to broadening and deepening our relations in the post-COVID-19 era.
Zimbabwean journalist Nigel Yamutumbu joins us now from Harare for more on this. Thank you, Nigel, for speaking to us. What more can you tell us about this second batch received by the government of Zimbabwe from China?
Yes, yesterday the Chinese government extended a second donation to the government and people of Zimbabwe to supplement and augment the first 200,000 doses that had been sent. Yesterday, 400,000 arrived, and according to government, this second batch will also be augmented by another 1 million that is expected to arrive at the end of this month. So the second batch that has arrived is also to continue what has already begun as the rollout program has been going on in the country.
Well, we know Zimbabwe has begun vaccinating, the people. Give us an update with that, especially because the government, plans to inoculate about 10 million, at least 10 million people to achieve herd immunity. How far has that gone?
Well, the numbers are still incredibly low, and the uptake is still generally low in terms of those that have been getting the vaccination. I mean, look, we're looking at vaccination donations of 200,000, 400,000. That is, relatively minimum to meet the target. Suffice to say, there has been general improvement and uptake, including among journalists. I also got vaccinated myself. Other prominent journalists watching got the vaccination. There is now some relative increase in uptake among government leaders, prolific leaders, journalists, and frontliners. But I think 10 million realistically may not be attainable, at least in the foreseeable future, judging by the numbers that have received the vaccine at the moment.
Okay, well, you've spoken about some journalists and officials, getting this vaccine. But there are reports that some doctors have been worried about the low acceptance of this particular vaccine that Zimbabwe has just received, Sinopharm, and some are saying because it's still in its final stages of testing. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, there is a big global debate on vaccination. I think part of the debate goes beyond science into either geopolitics or into conspiracy theory. But I think the real debate and discourse that has been taking place among the doctors in this country had been on the recognition and use more of these local remedies and preventative measures and so forth. There have been dissenting voices insofar as the vaccine, Sinopharm vaccine, has been concerned, but none have really been officially petitioned or officially been engaged with the government of Zimbabwe. Outside the pronouncements, that official pronouncement by doctors expressing concern that the rate at which frontline workers have been vaccinated is low. Outside of that, all has been playing out in the public domain and not necessarily in official channels.
All right, then. Thank you so much, Zimbabwean journalist Nigel Yamutumbu. Thank you for speaking to us.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
To other stories now. The UN Refugee Agency and its partners are appealing for $1.2 billion to provide vital humanitarian assistance for more than 2.2 million South Sudanese refugees living in 5 neighboring countries. South Sudan became the world's youngest nation nearly a decade ago, but today millions of its population are displaced either inside or outside its borders. Meanwhile, the crisis continues to be a children's one, with more than 65% of the refugee population under 18, including 66,000 children, I beg your pardon, who have been separated from their parents or usual caregivers.
Today, we are talking about 2.2 million South Sudanese refugees in the neighboring countries. And a major chunk of this refugee population is children. We are talking about 1.4 million South Sudanese children being refugees. The amount that we have asked today is going to help the refugees in the 5 neighboring countries, but also the host communities that have been hosting them so generously. COVID is not only a health crisis, it's a crisis of livelihoods as well. So with livelihoods disappearing, we are seeing food ration cuts, refugees and host communities not having enough to eat, and us not getting enough funding as humanitarian agencies mean we cannot do much for these refugees and their host communities. The needs are dire and immense, from health, shelter, food, water, and sanitation, and they need the world's help as soon as possible.
Meanwhile, the World Food Programme says South Sudan is one step away from famine. This follows the launch of the 2021 South Sudan Humanitarian Response Plan, aiming to reach 6.6 million people, including 350,000 refugees, with life-saving assistance and protection this year. The Humanitarian Response Plan has identified 8.3 million in need of assistance, including refugees across the country.
South Sudan is facing its highest levels of food insecurity and malnutrition since independence 10 years ago. The South Sudan Humanitarian Response Plan for 2021, which is being launched today, aims to reach 6.6 million people with life-saving assistance and protection this year. Violence and localized conflicts in many parts of the country also drive up humanitarian needs, and the impact, again, of COVID-19 on markets, services, and people's ability to move around have increased their vulnerability. So the upcoming lean season in South Sudan from May to July is likely going to be the most severe on record. And the immediate priorities in the response plan are to sustain the deliveries in the most food insecure areas and prepare for this upcoming rainy season, which could again be devastating.
A UN report has accused countries supporting armed factions in Libya of extensively violating an arms embargo imposed on the North African country. Libya has been under an arms embargo since the 2011 uprising that drove out the former leader, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. Until this month, the country has been split between a UN-recognized government in the west and warlord Khalifa Haftar's rival administration in the east. The two sides were supported by different regional powers. Some of Mr. Haftar's international supporters include the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Russia, Syria, and Egypt, and have been singled out in previous reports and in the one published on Tuesday. Turkey and Qatar, which support the authorities in Tripoli, have also been named in the report. A new unity government was sworn in on Monday, marking the end of years of rival administrations. A total of 118 Nigerians stranded in Libya have returned to the country. The returnees arrived at the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport, Abuja, at about 1:30 a.m. today via Baku Air. This was announced by the Nigeria Diaspora Commission in its Twitter handle, explaining that the Nigerians will be quarantined at the Federal Capital Territory Hajj camp for 14 days, in line with the COVID-19 protocols by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. Thousands of Nigerians who were stranded in parts of the world following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic have recently been evacuated. Still ahead on the program. A creative designer in Egypt invents a biodegradable material which she turns into beautiful decorative pieces. We'll show you after the break. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Yemen's rebel Houthi movement has expressed deep regret over a deadly fire at a migrant detention center in the capital Sana'a earlier this month. A senior Houthi official said 44 migrants had been killed and 193 others hurt in the blaze, which he described as accidental. On Tuesday, the UN called for an independent investigation into the fire that killed mostly Ethiopians on March 7th. In the meantime, survivors of that deadly fire in Sana'a are recounting the horror they witnessed that day at the hands of the Houthi rebels.
Sitting on the ground in the southern part of Sudan, Ethiopian migrant Ahmed Abdallah described the moment a fire started at an overcrowded detention center in Yemen's capital, Sana'a.
They fired projectiles at us The room filled with smoke and we all started to scream. As we cried for help, some of us started to faint and fall to the ground. I was near the door and managed to come out. They locked the room on others who were still inside.
Abdullah's statement was corroborated by the Human Rights Watch report on the incident published on Tuesday, which mentions projectiles as the cause. In its report, based on interviews with 5 Ethiopian survivors and UN officials, the HRW said that on the day of the fire, detainees had protested conditions by refusing to eat. A skirmish broke out and Houthi security forces arrived.
The smoke went through my nose and I suffocated and passed out. I covered myself with the blankets and jumped through the window. I saw my friends burning to death. I didn't receive any help after the nightmare.
The United Nations Migration Agency says the March 7th fire engulfed a hangar-like building holding around 350 people, from among 900 being held at the Immigration, Passport and Naturalization Authority holding facility at Sana'a Airport.
This facility was overcrowded with 3 times its capacity. Around 900 people were present on site on the day of the incident, and the building where the fire broke out was a hangar or a warehouse housing around 350 people. We understand that earlier that day, migrants had been protesting the conditions to the guards.
Many of the refugees were Ethiopians.
They're coming from the Horn of Africa, particularly from Ethiopia. These migrants are typically coming from underprivileged areas where they are coming to, to cross through Yemen to reach some rich Gulf countries. And hoping for better life. And that's what their intention to provide for their families and their loved ones.
On Friday, March 12th, footage released by the Houthis showed 44 bodies of those killed in the detention center blaze, lined up in numbered body bags in a dusty cemetery ahead of burial. Abdullah and around a dozen migrants who described themselves as survivors of the fire protested on Monday, March 15th, outside a UN building in Aden. They said that after the fire, they had been deported to government-held territory and had been forced to make a 3-day journey to Aden. Despite Yemen's war, migrants from the Horn of Africa still risk dangerous sea crossings in the hands of smugglers to get there, and routes to Saudi Arabia or other wealthy Gulf countries.
Niger is starting 3 days of national mourning after 58 people were killed by gunmen in 2 separate attacks near the border with Mali. Residents of the Western Tillaberi region said suspected militants targeted vehicles carrying traders returning from local markets on Monday. Now, it's not clear who carried out the killings, but the region has suffered frequent attacks by armed groups linked to the Islamic State group and Al-Qaeda. In January, more than 100 villagers were killed in the region in one of Niger's worst ever attacks. Well, 10 days after a series of explosions left more than 100 people dead in Equatorial Guinea, hospitals are still overwhelmed by the number of people injured. Aid agencies offering help to the country say some of the affected by the blast have not been seen or been able to seek treatment earlier as they do not have a health cover. The Israeli Defense Forces, who are offering medical aid in Bata, say that even though the search and operation activities have been called off, a lot of bodies remain unclaimed in the morgues. The government has made access to healthcare free of charge to allow those with no financial means to come forward and receive care. Now, this is the cause of the spike in cases in hospitals. Many people are currently being housed in a temporary shelter organized by the UN after the explosions that left more than 1,000 people homeless. Well, we move on to a story coming from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who says women need to be front and center of the recovery from the pandemic, not as a matter of charity, but as a matter of efficiency and effectiveness of social and community resilience. He was speaking at a town hall meeting with civil society representatives on the sidelines of the 65th session of the Commission on the Status of Women.
Despite these serious setbacks to gender equality and women's rights, there is a huge gender gap in the task forces and panels that are supposed to be building the recovery. And there is simply no excuse for this. Male-dominated teams will come up with male-dominated solutions. We cannot go back to the failed man-made policies that have resulted in the fragility we see around us, in healthcare systems, in social protection, in access to justice, and in the well-being of our planet. We need to take the opportunity of a reset based on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development to ensure that everyone enjoys the right of life, dignity, and security on a healthy planet. And we need to localize the Sustainable Development Goals, working with you, our civil society partners, to deliver real change on the ground.
And as we end the program today, an Egyptian who invented a biodegradable material by using eggshells and knots is using it to make countertops, decorative bowls, and colorful stones for jewelry. Let's head over now to Cairo to see some of her works. Who knows, your next tabletop or necklace could just be made of eggshells. Take a look.
You can now buy accessories, a table, or fancy items and make sure you protect the environment thanks to this new material developed by an Egyptian designer. Rania El-Kala uses egg and nut shells to create an environment-friendly material used in many products. The 31-year-old developed the item as part of her research for her master's degree at the German University in Cairo.
I got the idea from my father, who used to bring knots and we cracked them right before we eat them in order to have them fresh. Most of the knot fruits consist of shells, especially coconut. 67% of it is the shell. It's very hard, and I was astonished that it looks like wood. Why is no one using it? It's a waste.
In her shell homemade art studio, she processes shells into powder, heats it to a certain level, so it can later be used to create different products. She collects egg and nut shells from restaurants and shops and always asks her family members not to throw away the much-needed eggshells.
I try to use it in making furniture, consumable goods like combs or watches. I also participate with other partners, so it's not only me who's making the products. I can be a material supplier to anyone who wants to use this material for their projects. I can customize it. I can make it hard, soft, according to the color I want, or transparent.
Her project, Shell Homage, the Pebbles Hanger, won Italy's A Design Award and competition in 2017.
Well, recycling is always good for the environment. That's it on the program for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.